Hello and welcome back. Tim, we actually didn't discuss if this was quickfire or bonfire before we hit record, but nonetheless, it's a beautiful evening here in Chicago on a Chicago fireless weekend here. The weather turned out for us, even though the squad did not. I'm joined as always by the man in the chair, as it were. Tim is here with me today. Smaller crew. Tim, how are you feeling on this fine Sunday evening?
I think like you, kind of tired, kind of relaxed from the weekend, but hopefully ready to go. And you know what? Like it does seem like good bonfire weather. So like I figure unless we manage to like wrap this up faster than I think we probably will, we'll just be a bonfire for this one.
Well, the good news is whoever is listening to this will already know because it'll have the cover art and all that good stuff. But either way, hey man, it's always a good day to talk Chicago Fire football. We are sitting here on an impromptu bye week for the Fire after their match against Inter Miami was rescheduled due to the Leagues Cup final, which, if not already kicking off, is about to kick off, if I'm remembering my times correctly, Tim. It's about 7 o'clock on Sunday evening.
Yeah, we're like 3 minutes away from kickoff, and I can tell that we're both dying to see more Leagues Cup action.
The air is electric with Miami and Seattle Sounders. Shout out Seattle Sounders, honestly.
You know what? Shout out the LA Galaxy, who like could not win a game. Like we're on track for the worst season in MLS history and have now made it back to CONCACAF Champions Cup for 2026 because they managed to make it to winning the third place game in Leagues Cup.
Just such an insane happenstance, to be honest with you. I saw that just before we started and my thought was like, God, I hate MLS, but I love MLS. Like, it's just so perfect.
I mean, look, it's around the world though, right? Like it's one of the things about playing like in England in different leagues is like, there are just so many different cup competitions and you win one of those. And like, even if everything else is going badly, that's something you can hang your hat on. That's something that your supporters can celebrate. Like it gives you something that you're like, this is worthwhile, right? Sucks that the Fire lost in the US Open Cup the way that they did. But hey, we're about to talk about the Fire's chance to make it into the Leagues Cup if they keep the format the same as next year as they did this year, which they haven't announced, and if they have the tournament at all next year with the World Cup interrupting the season, which they haven't announced. So who knows?
Well, Tim, I mean, this is MLS. They're probably just going to play through the World Cup, right? There's like, who needs an international window? Like, come on.
I mean, I've heard that they do plan on taking a break. I've seen some discussion about what the schedule is going to look like next year. So I will say, get ready to learn Wednesday football. Everybody would be one of the takeaways. The season will start a little bit earlier and a little bit later, and there's going to be more midweek games because there's just not enough weekends.
Hell yeah, brother. More midweek games. And speaking of which, the Fire are now entering their home stretch. We've got nonstop football going through the end of the season here. No more bye weeks. I feel confident I can say that. I said it earlier.
No,
my God, there is a bye week. I'm insane.
And you said it so confidently too. But no bye weeks.
Because I said it like 3 weeks ago. And then there was this bye week. And I was like, well, it's not going to happen again. But of course, there is one more for the international window. What is that? October 11th, when the league is shut down slightly.
Yeah. So the Fire's last game before that and their last home game of the regular season is against Toronto on October 4th. And then following that, there's 2 weeks off. And then they face the Revs in Foxborough, not Farnsborough. Geez. Different town.
Let's hope a meaningless game.
Yeah, I mean that's what I think we're all hoping for. But yeah, and heck, it could be in Farnsborough. I mean, I don't know. Like the Fire already played the Revs in Rhode Island once this year. Like maybe they'll just go somewhere else. We never know.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll just play the whole thing in Maine. Maybe it'll be Portland Heart of Pines. Shout out the Hearts. But anyway.
I would make that away trip. I definitely would make that away
trip. Dude, you don't understand. If Chicago Fire and Portland Heart of Pines end up facing off in the US Open Cup, I will be there. And I will not be saying what jersey I'll be wearing. I will leave it there, because that will just be an exciting day for me. Shout out the entire state.
I know the industry you work in. I don't know, like, how good is your sewing actually? Could you make a half and half jersey, or would you like have to ask somebody to help you with that?
I don't do the actual sewing, but I know a guy who does, and he could absolutely do it.
Okay. See, because just because you don't actually have to do it as part of your job doesn't mean you don't know anything about it. I mean,
I could have a pair of pants. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Sorry for the insane sidebar there, folks. We We are now, like I mentioned, entering the home stretch here for Chicago Fire, the final 7 games of the season, kicking off this coming week against New England Revolution at home. We'll be back, obviously, for our midweek takes on that with the full crew, ideally, to talk a little preview of New England Revolution and Chicago Fire. Before we dive into the actual nitty-gritty of what's remaining in the schedule, where the playoff picture stands, which is kind of what we'll be talking about today, a few quick beats on notes. First and foremost, some Fire 2 moves that are some exciting and interesting things to keep in mind. Fire 2 acquire winger Damian Neek from Grasshopper. He's at 20 years old. He's been playing in the 3rd division of the Swiss soccer pyramid for Grasshoppers under 21 side. So once again, Chicago Fire claiming victory over LAFC in just another fashion. LAFC owns Grasshopper, if you were not aware. The Fire also loaning forward Dean Bolts out to Madison, Forward Madison in USL 1 for the remainder of the season. Up the Mingos, shout out them. And then this is not official, but it has been reported by Alex Calabresi of Men in Red 97. Chicago Fire reportedly acquiring 17-year-old goalkeeper Owen Pratt, I believe from the Galaxy Academy, Tim. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So from the Galaxy Academy, the deal would be such that he can be signed to a homegrown deal with the Fire because he'll have been with the team for a year through the Academy, even if he's spending time in Next Pro next year. So it would be ideally a Fire 2 move for next year and then a first team deal in 27 for Owen Pratt. If all this goes through and it works out the way I think many expect it to, seems to be a talented youngster. When I say many, I mean many on Twitter. I don't mean many sitting in this room. Let's say that much.
Hey man, look, then the Fire will have homegrowns potentially coming through in the course of a couple seasons from the both coasts as well as the Chicagoland area. So that's when everywhere is your home.
You can never have too many good young goalkeepers, Tim. And I'm not going to say what I was going to say. And then finally,
I feel like the Fire Academy are trying to challenge that assertion as much as possible with how they've been growing them, but fair.
Yeah, fair play. And then lastly, exciting news for the youngster Robert Turdine. He made his professional debut with Chicago Fire 2 today. That was a victory for the side in penalty kicks, so 2 points secured there. And then, kind of leads us into our next point of call-ups, but a big celebration for Dylan Borso, not only getting the 2 points there, but also was called up to the United States Youth National Team U20 side. So congratulations to Dylan, and I believe his first USYNT call-up, so shout out Dylan. And if it's not, either way, shout out Dylan. Also in that list, Joel Waterman making another call up with the Canadian men's national team. He'll be playing at Romania on September 5th and again in Wales on September 9th. A group of friendlies as I almost said Canada, as Canada prepares for the World Cup next summer. And Leonardo Barroso also called up to the Portugal U21s for Euro qualifying. He'll play against Azerbaijan on the 5th. And Scotland on the 9th. That'll be in Scotland. Shout out Fir Park. Shout out Motherwell. Bet you didn't think I knew that one, Tim, but I did. Moving forward.
I will never be, I will just say, I'm just going to assume that you know things about every part of the pyramid throughout Britain from here on out, and then I'll never be surprised. Only disappointed. I'm just setting you up for failure.
Shout out Independent Scotland. Should be, but that's neither here nor there. Reunify Ireland. Shout out my boys. I have no context on that one, guys. I'm just having fun. And then lastly, Joe Mansueto decided he didn't want to buy another soccer club. He wanted to buy an entire league. Chicago Fire announced this week that they've purchased Chicagoland Indoor Soccer League. It's a winter youth league here in the city. There's a wonderful story up on menandred97.com currently about what drove the purchase, what they plan to do with it. It does seem to be kind of an extension of the Academy and Discovery Center systems that they've put into place already. Tim, anything you want to add? I guess on any of the stories, but that one specifically I thought was kind of fascinating, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that what it goes to show is that the Fire are serious about becoming a really major force in the game throughout the region, right? Like not just with stuff that they're running, like the Academy and their youth club, which is run out of the city, but also still in the suburbs, right? Because the Academy has like a pan Chicagoland focus, but the Chicago youth system is more focused on the city, and this kind of gives them more of a suburban focus. Although obviously a lot of kids in the city play in those teams, and they're going to continue just to try to become as good of a resource as they can throughout the youth landscape, which I think is kind of a cool way to be looking at a professional club's role. in like the area, and I think that it just is going to help solidify what the Fire are doing for both like growing the game in like that sense, but also just like growing awareness of the club. And the conversation I had, it's like, look, we want to make sure Sparky gets out to some of these games. We want to make sure some first team players are getting out to some of these games and meeting the teams and talking to players, which is cool, right? Like, I mean, I remember when I was like a kid playing in a sport, like just how awesome it was to be able to get to meet a professional, chat with him a little bit, like kick a ball
100%.
around for a minute. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, this sounds silly, but don't underestimate the amount of sway that like literally having a logo on the jersey you get at the beginning of the season does. Right? I don't think that's like nothing. If nothing else, you're just building in brand awareness for these people who actively participate in and enjoy the sport, and that's. It sounds silly to say, but that's like base level, right? That's how you start to grow the cultural impact of the club moving forward. You start young and kind of get them in. So exciting times there. Again, would definitely recommend heading to the website, menandred97.com. Wonderful story up there that dives into it a little bit deeper as well. So would definitely check that out if you're curious for a little bit more info there. That said, what brings us here today is specifically just to kind of recap as we enter this home stretch, the current Eastern Conference playoff picture, where the Fire stand in it, and how we think that's going to potentially be playing out over the next few weeks. So after a weekend of results here, some movement and things are starting to, I think, clarify a little bit here. So just to kind of run through some of the important results from this weekend. Red Bull New York had a 0-0 draw against Columbus. NYCFC lost 2-1 to DC United, which is an unfortunate result for NYCFC, all things considered. And the Revs losing 2-1 to Charlotte, who we'll talk about in a minute, is on a bit of a heater and maybe no longer in kind of the flux of conversation we thought they may be. To give you an idea, if you're not looking at Google currently for the Eastern Conference playoff picture, Chicago Fire currently sit in 10th with 39 points. In 9th is New York Red Bulls with 40 points. The Fire have 2 games on hand over the New York Red Bulls currently. NYCFC also on 27 games with the Fire has 44 points. Columbus Crew have dropped all the way to 7th with 46 points. You also see Inter Miami sitting in 6th, but they've only played 25 games, so 2 less than the Fire even. So we would expect that number to climb rapidly as they start to make up some of these games they've missed due to Club World Cup and now Leagues Cup. I think the interesting concept here to me, Tim, and we talked about it a little bit before we kicked off, things have clarified a little bit, right? It does seem to be currently you're shooting for 8th place, or you're shooting for 9th place, excuse me. And the question becomes a little bit more, who are you going to see? Could it be somebody like a Columbus? Or could it be somebody in Orlando City, a Nashville? I mean, the Fire in 10th at 39 points are only 11 points off Charlotte, who now sit in 3rd, which is an insane string of results for that side, as they looked like they were about to implode earlier in the year.
Yeah. And again, like they've just been winning games, and they've been winning games, not necessarily against the most impressive opponents in the world, but when you look at the teams they beat, you say, okay, that the Fire takes 6 points off of that team in the Eastern Conference, and the answer is just no for pretty much all of them, right? And like that's the difference. Like that's how narrow the margins are. Just to put a little math on what the Fire situation is like, they control their destiny for 8th and 9th places as well, and I guess 10th and below, but I think that those are the places, they need help to get 7th or higher. Mathematically, they're not out of the supporter shield race, but come on. The chance of getting, anywhere higher than 5th, we're talking about something in the range of like 1% altogether. So it's, it's looking like the chances are about 2/3 of the Fire make it to the postseason, with something like, 53% chance that it'll be 8th or 9th. And then maybe like a 15% chance it'll be in one of the playoff proper spots. Obviously, winning your games does a lot to help you there, even if they can't guarantee 7th or above. Like the chances that like the Red Bulls, NYCFC, and the Crew are going to be winning every one of those games is pretty low. So it just is really at this like the point you don't have to worry if you just take care of business in your own end, right? And that's the position the Fire are still in, but they have to do it.
Well, and to that point, a little bit of a mixed bag, right, in terms of who they have left remaining on the schedule. I mean, as you alluded to, Tim, you play New England Revolution on decision day. You also play them this coming week. So 2 against New England Revolution. All things considered, though, New England has seen a bit of a turn in form. That should be 6 points if you are playing at the level you're supposed to be playing.
Look, it has to be 6 points, right? Because like that, the loss against the Revs, the Revs loss to Charlotte basically knocked them out of the playoff picture, right? Like they've got like a less than 1% chance of making it in. Like it's incredibly unlikely
For
that
reference,
they will.
they're in 11th right now, 8 points back of the Fire. So they look, Fire are one of the teams you're chasing down. You have potentially 6 points to win off them too. So your point is correct, Tim, in that they are effectively out of the playoff picture, but that does not dismiss the possibility of them coming into both of those games thinking they have something, they have a chance at something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, or for the very least can play spoiler, right? And we've seen a lot of teams do that where all of a sudden when you've got nothing to play for, you just become a very good team at playing spoiler. That game, I mean, like, look, the Revs looked absolutely miserable earlier in the season. They, you know, Carl's heel looked like he was a shadow of the man that I think had been one of the best number 10s in the league and like arguably the best number 10 in the league that was not named Lionel Messi. And he's found a lot of that form back all of a sudden. And like, look, Caleb Porter is going to be Caleb Porter. Like, I think that like people that have been following the league for a few years just kind of know who he is and his reputation of like, he will come in, he will get your team to win MLS Cup in year 2, which is this year for them. And he will leave a trail of destruction in his wake because that just is what he's done twice now. And it doesn't look like, it looks like that charm is kind of broken, but I think at this point, it's probably fair to say that like a lot of the players are playing against him. And it's like, look, us versus the world, which can be a powerful motivator. And like, a wounded animal is sometimes the most dangerous, all those other metaphors. And so that makes them in some ways a less than ideal opponent for the Fire because they have nothing to lose because they've pretty much already lost it.
Yeah. Well, and you flip the script from there, right? I mean, you do see NYCFC fighting for a playoff spot. You do see Minnesota fighting in a pretty wide open Western Conference, all things considered. I mean, we do know, San Diego FC is who they are. LAFC, we expect to be kind of a juggernaut at this point. But Minnesota United has the opportunity, right? They are a quality side. They've been hanging around kind of the middle to top of the Western Conference standings for a majority of the year. You already lost to them once, right? Granted, with a pretty heavily rotated side, but still, you did lose in Minnesota this year. You now have to go back. But you're also seeing Columbus and Inter Miami. Columbus all of a sudden on a skid, right? If this has not picked up in 2 to 3 weeks when the Fire are facing them, or 4, excuse me, you could see a Columbus Crew team also fighting for a playoff spot or to get out of the play-in, which does go a long way for some of these teams. And then an Inter Miami side who, I mean, Tim, feel free to disagree with me. On any given day, I don't expect them to win MLS Cup, but on any given day, they are the best team in the league, right? Just purely based on Lionel Messi being Lionel Messi.
Right. And like, again, like you don't know exactly what state he's going to be in, how many times he's going to be going 90. Although like, that's the thing, like Javier Mascherano, we talked about this when the Fire played them before. His solution to like, how quickly do you rotate? Like how much do you rotate is just don't rotate. And like, that seems like it's playing with fire when you've got a bunch of guys that are like on the wrong side of 30 and especially the wrong side of 35. Not intentionally, but like, well, it was a little bit. But like, look, so far it's worked out for them. And, you don't want to bet against Inter Miami being able to take any game they want. And like Minnesota, that like they have a bye week next week. Their game after that is against San Diego. And if they beat San Diego, at that point, they're thinking, we can win the conference, right? Like we can guarantee home advantage all the way through to MLS Cup, which is a one and done game. We saw what happened last year with the Galaxy. Like the Red Bulls kind of made it from like lower in the standings and made it up, but you're making it easier on yourself if you finish top. And you don't even know what opponent you're going to be facing because like Miami was knocked out last year. And I think that they just think this could be our chance to winning a trophy. And they probably don't want to give that up. And so that can put them in a very dangerous place if you're the Fire because they're going to be heavily motivated for that match.
Yeah. And I think gosh, I know I alluded to this earlier in the year, like when we talked post-transfer window. There is an aspect of like, so we've mentioned at length the Fire struggles at home. 4 of these final 7 games are at home. And they are all, outside of Columbus, I think games you expect to win. But now I think you look in with a renewed interest at that New England game of what does Matt Turner bring purely from a shot-stopping effort, right? Obviously some improvements there. We know who NYCFC are. That should be a winnable game for the Fire, given they could have and probably should have beaten them the last time they played. Brian Gutierrez was able to control himself a little better. But even you look at Toronto, October 4th, just before kind of that last bye week, Toronto all of a sudden, I mean, you have Jose Cifuentes back, you have Georgi Mihailovic in the midfield. Like this is a little bit of a gauntlet for the Fire to end the season here. And for a team that we've talked a lot about mentality issues, frankly, like showing up to games, being ready for games, is that kind of something that crosses your mind here, Tim, of like, frankly, are these guys going to be able to get up and play these games in the moments when they need to?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the biggest question, right? Because I think that if you look at the strength of schedule based on how skilled the opponents are, the Fire should be very comfortable about their chances making the playoffs. But I think if you write a script about the Fire missing the playoffs but coming close, that script is based on things like that 3-1 loss to NYCFC. It's based on a 2-2 draw against Atlanta in a game that looked entirely winnable and probably was entirely winnable. It's a game where, like, you draw 1-1 to Montreal early at home, like drawing to DC United in your home opener, right? Like those are the differences. Kick. Yeah, exactly. Like, and look, one or two of those things are going to happen in a year. And like, that's fine, right? Like you just like that happens to every team. But that is enough of those things where that's the difference between the Fire being where they are in the standings and the Fire being where Charlotte is in the standings, right? And like we saw head to head, the way the Fire played against Charlotte, I think it's a matchup that flatters Charlotte. I don't think Charlotte or flatters the Fire. I don't think Charlotte are nearly as good as some people are, but they've been grinding their way to results and the Fire haven't. And I think that part of that comes to the mentality. And you have to be concerned about, are those things going to happen again? Because the Fire have been dropping winnable points, sometimes in draws, sometimes in losses. And the flip side is like they were not able to get many, if any, points off of teams where you're like, okay, this is punching up and you wouldn't expect them to win, right? Like they played well against FC Cincinnati, didn't get a result, right? Mm-hmm. They lost the first game against Philly. They lost 1-0 and that was a game where they could have gotten a point or 3 points depending on how things went. All those things like, and those all add up. And so the Fire, I think, to really be comfortable, what I want to see from them is them getting at least one of those results against, I mean, like take your pick of like Minnesota, Miami. I would still put the Crew in that conversation, which could very easily feel like a 6-pointer at that stage, depending on what the Crew are doing of like, you really want those 3 points. And any of those things, I think, one, I'd feel a lot more comfortable about the Fire's chances of making the postseason. And two, you'd feel a lot more comfortable about the Fire's chances of doing something once they're in the postseason, right? Because like we did punch an opponent that a lot of people seem to love.
Yeah, and there is an aspect of this as well. Like you're getting some of these matchups at the best possible time. I made the comment earlier this week that it was I didn't post anywhere. It was a message, but that yes, it's disappointing to be missing Joel Waterman and Leonardo Barroso against New England Revolution. That said, if we're missing Joel Waterman, I don't want to start Leonardo Barroso, right? Like I would like to start Jonathan Dean. I think part of the reason we saw such a collapse against Philadelphia this time around was we saw Leo's like true defensive floor, right? Which is not an indictment on the player. He's 19 years old. He is still learning. He is still developing. And I expect that to get better. And I think in the biggest games, he's the guy you want to start. I'll say that. But when you're starting a 17-year-old at center back, I want the 28-year-old who has scrapped and fought his entire way through just about every possible league of United States soccer and knows the system like the back of his hand, right? Because I don't think that's an outrageous thing to say, even though the talent disparity is there. So I think that's a positive for that New England Revolution game, right? You mentioned, Tim, like the Columbus Crew could be scrapping to get out of the play-in. They could also take care of business over the next few weeks, and you could potentially see, hey, this is not a game we really need to get up for. You can catch them sleeping in your own building and take advantage of that result. You're getting Inter Miami on a Tuesday night, right? So Saturday to Tuesday, not a quick turnaround, and that is where the Fire have put a huge emphasis on recovery this year. That needs to be one of those days where, hey, Hugo, I know you went 90 on Saturday. You're going 85 this week. It's just going to happen because there's a very real chance that Luis Suarez, Lionel Messi, Jordi Alba, Sergio Busquets are not going, right? They're not going 70 plus minutes in that game. And you have a real opportunity to pull out a result on a team who, I mean, not to be like, I can't believe this, but they just moved on one of their better younger bench players in Benjamin Karmaski, who like I'm not a huge fan of, but he's a valuable piece to have, and they're just getting rid of him. Like, there are
Yeah.
opportunities here. And I think, Tim, to something I think you alluded to before, like missing the playoffs here, I think would be, given the current situation, a failure, right? Beginning
I think
of the
that was the
season, it
clear
may not
goal,
have felt
right?
that way.
No, I
Yeah,
think it would have, right? I think the clear goal was making the playoffs. And look, as someone that has watched every minute of the Fire playing this season, that has been to, more than half the games at this point, like in person, like that is, this team is night and day different from the teams that we've seen in the previous seasons. They're playing
agreed.
better soccer. They're playing more recognizable soccer. Like, they are going to almost certainly have the highest point total they've had in the past 5 seasons. 5 seasons where they didn't make the playoffs. I don't think that any of that matters. I don't think the improvement matters just because it's a really tough Eastern Conference. I think a lot of fans expect the team to make the postseason, and anything else, it doesn't really matter. It just is going to be a failure. And maybe for some of the players that have been holdovers that have been here for a while, where they recognize the difference, that may hurt their psychology enough to say, like, look, I thought things were different under Greg, but you know what? Nothing mattered, because in the end, we ended up in the same place. And that could hurt the team going forward. And I think that you just don't want that to be the case.
Yeah. And frankly, and I don't mean to like harp on this because I spent a lot of time doing it earlier in the year, you punted on US Open Cup. You did. You punted up on a quarterfinal for a cup specifically so you could start a fuller lineup against Cincinnati in a game you lost away. That's not nothing. Again, like one thing I alluded to at the beginning of the season was like, hey, look, you missed the playoffs, but you go to the Open Cup final, or, you have a really great semifinal run. All right. Like, the vibes can change. The vibes can still be positive. You can miss out by a couple points and say, hey, look, it's because we prioritized this. We dropped a league result or two. I think to have gone out and Open Cup the way you did, by rotating so heavily and then losing that game in extra time, seemingly feeling like, hey, we could have won this if we had started our best 11, in my opinion, I think I think it reinforces like what you're saying there, Tim, of like, maybe the vibes aren't fixed here. Maybe the team is better. Maybe the structures are better, but maybe there still isn't the right priorities in place, if that makes sense.
I think the priorities are in place. Like, just to be honest about that, right? Like,
I
can
agree
say,
with you too. I'm just saying from a player, does Andre Franco happen? Does the next Andre Franco happen? Right? If this season turns out that way. And that's more my point.
I think
right?
I think it probably does. I think that there's been enough of a shift there. And I think that, like, from what I've heard from players, like, there is a real shift in the locker room, and it just feels different, right? Like, you can, just to say this, like, it feels like a much more united locker room than in the time that I've been covering the team, by a long shot. Now, will that always be the case going forward? I mean, obviously we can't say that, right? So I think that but that's like, you have to make the playoffs, right? And like, as it stands right now, the Fire are in a position where mathematically, like, you look at the strength of the schedule, you look at the opponents, you look at the number of games, they have a better chance of making the playoffs than missing them. And it's within their ability to make that happen, right? Like, they don't need any help from anybody. They just need to stay there. Now, again, like, this is why you have to do things like beating the Revs. And it mathematically may be necessary for the team to have a win against an opponent the team has had difficulties winning against. No, like, I think that you maybe undersold the challenges of playing the Revs. You said it's like the right time for a lot of these games. This is more or less the worst time to be playing the Revs, because they, like I said, have nothing to play for. They have Matt Turner now. Like, they have Carlos Heel playing better. I think that a lot of the players are assuming that no matter what, at this point, Caleb Porter is not going to be there next year. And so that probably feels like a pretty big weight lifted off their chest, based on what we know of the way that players respond to him over longer spans of time. But, like, you know what, there are some things that I think maybe you say this is maybe the opportunity for us to do well. Like, the Inter Miami have a bye week next week when the Fire are playing the Revs. And then after that, it's like 2 games, like, it's a, midweek game and a Saturday game every single week, or Sunday game for, I think, a couple of them, every single week up until they're meeting the Fire. They're going to be tired, right? And like, they're going to be tired, and it's getting close to that point when, just to be blunt about it, like, you're getting close to another international window, and I think some of the guys, like, they won't have left for camp yet, but like, you can have their body, but you can't have their soul. I think with some of the better known names on that Inter Miami roster. And so maybe they're out of focus. Like, look, you know what? Like, people can say, oh, it doesn't seem to really count as a win because of those things. The same way that I think a couple of people I've heard talk about, like, sort of like poo-poo the Fire's win against Vancouver when they were just on fire. And I don't think that that's fair because you play the opponent that's in front of you, and the Fire were missing players too, and like all that stuff. You get a win, and I think that the Fire will feel absolutely thrilled with themselves if they get a win on a Tuesday night in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, Tim, that Chicago Fire in Fort Lauderdale will be Inter Miami's 6th game in 17 days, which is, I think, an insane thought to think. But
yeah, but then again, you'll assume that squad rotation. Oh yeah, that's right. They don't rotate anybody ever.
Yeah. Like, the only downside is they play Toronto right before they play Chicago. So it's like, which game are you going to rotate for? Tough to say.
Well, I mean, Toronto, I think at this point are also like another one of those, like, they suddenly did some moves that got better in the summer window, and they, like, they've got nothing to lose at this point. Like, they're playing for next year. It seems like the locker room's united. It seems like Jonathan Osorio is playing like Jonathan Osorio at his absolute best. Like, I think that that's the thing. But like, I just keep on coming back to this, right? Like, the Fire just need to win the games that they can win, right? Like, that's something that we haven't seen from the team consistently. And part of that's a learning curve. Like, I don't think you begrudge the team. I'm not going to say, oh, they're soft or stuff like that, because I think that that's overly simplistic. And I don't think that's really been what the problem is. I just think they haven't done it for a variety of reasons, because there's a learning curve in learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they just need to do that, right? Like, they've got a limited number. They've got 7 opportunities in the regular season to do that. And
yeah,
and
from there, it's anybody's game. I mean, look, I think maybe this is kind of where we wrap, because there's only so much we can talk about when there's no game actually happening, right? But like, Tim, I've said, I think from jump, and maybe you agree with me. I don't know that we've ever like directly talked about this, or I've asked your thoughts on it. Like, I do think you get in the game, you've got a chance. Like, if you're in the dance, you can win it purely based on the attacking prowess. And as I've said plenty about many different coaches, like, there's a benefit to having a coach who has good experience and has done well in knockout tournaments, right? It's one of the reasons why before the Greg Berhalter news was official, my thought was like, do you make a run at like Eric Ten Hag? I don't know, man. Maybe. Do you make a run at like Gareth Southgate? Not that I think you can get Gareth Southgate, but maybe you can. Like, there is.
Oh boy.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying.
I would not be making a run at Gareth Southgate, but okay.
Somebody's about to. I mean, shoot. But you understand the point I'm making, right? Of like, in a league where ultimately, like, you can be middle of the road, and once you get in the playoffs, you got every opportunity to win a trophy. I think it's a real benefit in terms of what you can have in the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally agree with you. I will say that so far we have not. I think something that I would like to see, and that I think the Fire would like to see, just to believe in themselves, is one of those wins where they win a game against an opponent that on paper seemed like a game that they shouldn't be winning. And we just haven't seen enough of that, right? Like, we saw the team losing to Philly, losing to Nashville, like once terribly and once just, losing. And just the Fire have a couple opportunities this regular season to get one of those. I think you get one of those that gives you the confidence of like, we're in the knockout. Like, and even if it's Columbus, who I think would be the most, like, that is a absolute nightmare fuel opponent for a play-in game in like the 8th or 9th seed, right? Like, but I think even then you say, look, we beat them when they came to our building, like last month, and we just have to do it one more time. The Red Bulls made it to MLS Cup last year in a game that I think that it's fair to say they had a legitimate shot at winning with 47 points. They were 7th in the table last year. That is 8 points more than the Fire have, and the Fire have 7 games to get that distance, which is basically right around where the playoff line is, right? So you're 100% right. Like, once you're in, you can do it. But I think for the Fire's confidence, I want to see them win the games against teams that are kind of comfortably not in the playoffs now, like the Revs.
Agreed.
And then at least one game against someone that will give them something to hang their hat on at the end of the season.
And like, let's be clear really quick, and then this is kind of where we'll wrap. Like, every single game left on the schedule is winnable for one reason or another, including Minnesota, who is currently on 51 points and second in the West. Like, you had the opportunity to beat Minnesota in Minnesota 2 months ago. You didn't. There are plenty of reasons we can talk about for that. You didn't, but you could have. And they've, Tim, I'm failing to recall if they have any big incoming transfers. I know they had a few outgoing. Like, I don't think this team is as rock solid as it was 2 weeks ago, just given the way the window has gone for them. But maybe I'm forgetting a big incoming that they had.
They did add, I will say that, I mean, they did lose some very good pieces, right? Which maybe,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's calculated. I don't think they're trying to sabotage this season.
No,
but, you're 100% right. Like,
you get the valuation.
Yeah. I mean, now you said that every game's winnable. The flip side is that like every game is losable, right? Like I think the way the Revs played against Charlotte, like they were not playing worse than some of the opponents the Fire have lost to that were lower than them. Like in my CFC, right? Like that was a game that was winnable. We talked about that. The game against the Red Bulls, like they just need to start showing that they can comfortably win the games that on paper they should. And look, like again, it's a proven moment to like themselves, to I think all of us that are watching them, and we're going to find out a lot pretty soon. It does really feel like, we're going to be talking about this game in more depth later on this week, but like the Revs, that first game against them really is a must win. But a little bit because of the math, but a lot of it is just because like, look, if you're not beating the Revs, who you have to face twice at this point in the season, knowing what's on the line, knowing what kind of opponent they are, having had this much time off to prepare, even if you're missing a couple of guys to call-ups, like, and unfortunately not Matt Turner missing on the other side because he wasn't called up, which is like, thanks, Botch, the one thing we needed from you. Right? But like, look, it's like, you just, that is must win, because if you aren't doing that, then it's like, it does kind of raise this, like, what the heck is the objective of all this after all kind of thing.
Yeah. No, 100%. Sorry, I had to chuckle because I think the big incoming that I was thinking of for Minnesota United was Mofo King out of Orlando Pirates, and that name just makes me chuckle. Sorry. Anyway, but yeah, well said, Tim. Well said, and I think that is where we'll kind of wrap here. As always, give us a follow on the social medias, Men in Red 97, anywhere and everywhere that you consume soccer content. Head on over to the website. Again, really wonderful story about the purchase of Chicago Indoor Soccer League. So I would highly recommend checking that out to get kind of the full scoop on what that means for the future of the club from the youth level. I think it could end up being a very interesting tool for them to be able to leverage. And a step closer to that, just to shout out Alex's coverage for some of the moves in Next Pro, because I think that helps shape what we're going to see a little bit more immediately, potentially coming into the first team, or at least filling that pipeline. Absolutely. Well said. And as always, thank you so much for joining us here. I feel like we can call this a bonfire. Thanks for joining us around the bonfire. It's been a pleasure to have you. We love what we do, and we do it because people tune in. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us around the bonfire. And as always, come on, you Men in Red.